For an entire generation, people have experienced Star Wars the only way it's been possible, on the TV screen. But if you've only seen it this way, you haven't seen it at all.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
We've been waiting for you.
Welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. Here are your hosts, Dan Z and Corey Clubb.
Hello, this is Dan Z, and welcome to show number 3 of Coffee with Kenobi, a brand new Star Wars podcast that analyzed our favorite saga in a whole new way. With me is my good friend and co-host, Corey Clubb.
Hello, everybody. It is awesome to be here with you for show number 3. You've probably noticed our big push to raise awareness of our show, and we're grateful for everyone's support. We're especially grateful for Ed Dahlsta and IndieCast for a big plug we received on episode 167 of the IndieCast. Awesome! Plus, on Facebook, fan page Star Wars Fans of EU and the Bearded Trio really went above and beyond as well. Thanks to them for their tireless efforts to bring awareness to our Facebook page, website, and the show in general. Rob from the Bearded Trio even featured us on his Facebook page. We are so grateful. We could not do this without everyone's support, and we thank you very much.
In today's show, we look at news regarding J.J. Abrams and news on filming Episode 7, E3, a blog from collector extraordinaire Steve Sansweet. Finally, we will address our topic for today's discussion, your opinions on the Jedi Order and Attachments. We have a great discussion for you, and we want to thank everybody for their thoughts, comments, and emails. This is a conversation not to be missed.
We will also introduce our topic for show number 4, as well as discuss our very first contest, where the winner will receive a Coffee with Kenobi t-shirt. And now, let's see what's brewing in the Star Wars universe this week.
Oh, wait. This is interesting.
You found something.
On our first news story, I'm sure you've already heard about this, Corey, and it's been circulating on the web for a while, but J.J. Abrams has been talking a little bit about his ongoing plans for Episode 7, and of course, he's not really revealing a heck of a lot, which is his MO, but he has given us some interesting information. Did you notice any of that?
I did, and he's moving to London by the end of the year to do some shooting in their studios over there. He had said, I quote, "It is so massive and so important to people. I think the key is to moving forward on something like this and is honoring but not reverting back to what came before." I think that's a good thing, because I think he's trying to take his own natural take on it. I think we've talked about this before in our first episode, where he's going to really approach it with his style, and a pretty good job, I think.
They talked about this a lot on a recent Force cast. They really picked apart this whole honoring but not revering what came before. So it's like they are taking all the Star Wars, the classic stuff we know and love, the prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, and the Clone Wars. I'm sure, I don't know how much Abrams is going to include the Clone Wars. I hope that he does, especially for us diehard fans. But they're not going to revere it in such a way that they can't be creative. They can't be insightful or put their own unique spin on it. I don't want to see what I already saw. I don't want a remake of the original trilogy or any of the Star Wars films that we already have. I want to see homages and clearly knowledge and respect for what came before. But I also want to see new stories. And I also, maybe this whole revering what came before, not revering, I don't know how much that's related to the EU or the expanded universe. What do you think?
I think, like we said before, the EU is going to be a factor, I think, in some respects, because it is there. And to tell a brand new story and not have some kind of, inkling of those storylines that are already out there, they've got to do something with that as far as that goes. But I think, like you said, Dan, I like what you said about how they're really respecting it, what has come before that. Even, I think, the prequels, too. And then, of course, the new Rebels animated series definitely is going to be obviously a lead-in. It's going to be our first taste of what's kind of to come, I think. So I think we've got a lot of good things to look forward to.
When you brought up the whole thing with the prequels, it seems like a lot of people are hinting around to, not even hinting, some are outright saying that Disney, since they've taken over and, Clone Wars being canceled, the Emmy-winning Clone Wars, again, let's have a little congratulations to Dave Filoni and everybody, absolutely, for their Emmy-winning Season 5. And I guess besides Lucas winning an NAACP award, and you probably heard his clip, this is the first award he's ever won, so I think that was awesome. But a lot of people are saying that Disney's trying to distance themselves from the prequels, which is one of the reasons why the Clone Wars was possibly canceled. So I hope that you're right, and they do keep all that there. That mythology is rich and deep and powerful. They need to address that. They need to keep that partially on the radar, partially in the back of our minds, but it can't just be ignored. It's an important part of the saga.
Oh, you hear that?
Yes.
Some background noise.
It's just Palpatine. That's not a deal.
Also, Dan, did you get a chance to see that new trailer they had for the new Battlefront games coming out from DICE?
I did. I saw that. They said they're gonna borrow from the films, but they're going to have original stories and gameplay. They basically said that about all of the EA Star Wars games. And there's this awesome 30-second trailer that shows a snowspeeder and an AT-AT. There's really not much else that's shown. We'll have a link to that trailer in the show notes. I'm guessing that if you're listening to this podcast, you've already seen this trailer. But what do you think about that? Battlefront. Did you play Battlefront a lot?
I did play a couple of them, and they're loads of fun. I mean, it hits every movie in the trilogy, and a lot of you get to be a lot of different characters. A lot of fans are looking forward to it because it was such a big, fun, open world type setting, run around just fighting the classic battles.
Plus, there's that cool stuff where you get to unlock the characters, and all of a sudden you maybe get to be Darth Maul or Darth Vader, or who knows who you get to be.
Yeah.
You sneak around, jumping in different vehicles. It's a heck of a lot of fun. It's sort of like Grand Theft Auto, but PG rated and with Star Wars. And I love it. Even then, when they had the PSP versions of it, so it's been a fan favorite. It's been around for a long time, but we haven't seen a new Battlefront in a long time. So people are very excited.
I think also, Dan, it's a nice thing to be able to see that it is still in development for Star Wars fans, because when they did away with LucasArts, a lot of fans are afraid that there wasn't going to be anything out there, as far as video games, and now they're really branching out as far as divvying up these different properties. Some of the games that are out there, like Battlefront, and I think it was Level 1313 is still kind of in development. They're really kind of come back around, and hopefully this is actually good news for video game fans.
Our next item we wanted to talk about was Steve Sansweet had this post on the official Star Wars blog, and this has been making the podcast and the internet. That park in Northern California that has those life-size statues of Yoda and of Indiana Jones. They're awesome looking. Have you seen the images?
I did. They look great. They look absolutely wonderful. Nice art craftsmanship. They went to great lengths to get these done, and they just revealed them, and they look fantastic.
And Lucas, he contributed a lot of this. He tore down some buildings and helped with making this park come to fruition. And I heard on the IndyCast that the Indiana Jones statue is over 6 feet tall. And so it's life-size to Ford, and then the Yoda one is over 2 feet tall. That would be it. I think that's the thing where you and I need to make a trek. Go down there, go to Rancho Obi-Wan, and hey, we'll go by Disneyland and ride Star Tours. That'll be awesome.
Sounds good. And then, talking about George Lucas, he recently got married, and congrats to George. Absolutely. And we are support, and congratulations go out to them.
Yeah, and actually there were some beautiful photos of he and his bride. She's a Chicago gal, which we like that, being located in Illinois ourselves. Yes, definitely. Congratulations to George Lucas and his bride. For our next story, is the fact that there are no stories at all when it comes to Episode 7. However, that has not stopped the internet from going insane.
Rumors are fun. They're fun to listen to, fun to read about, but, it's not a true fact. And if we're going to hear something from Disney or from, StarWars.com officially, I'll take that, talk about that, and use that for newsworthy stuff. But, as far as rumors go, the internet's so full of stuff, and it's almost a drag just to be able to pick through it all.
You said the internet is full of stuff. It's full of something, all right? I hate these rumors. I find them really annoying. There's some pops that it's going to be in Episode 7. Those two bozos from Twilight are going to be in Episode 7, blah, blah, blah. I think it's all garbage. Please, stop. Go away. As Dave Filoni said in a recent Rebel Force Radio interview, look, they're not purposely torturing us by not giving us information. They are doing this strategically. They know what they are doing. I'm pretty sure that Lucasfilm and Disney know how to market and how to sell a good story. So don't give us... hello. How do you open your Christmas presents on the 4th of July when Celebration Europe 2 comes out, when Comic-Con comes out, when the D23 Expo comes out in August? That's when we're going to get our information. That's when we get our news. We're going to learn about Star Wars Rebels. We're going to learn about Episode 7, which is still 2 years away. Now, I wouldn't mind hearing some information now and then, but I have a feeling that when it comes, we'll have plenty to talk about, plenty to blog about, plenty to podcast about. When you see these rumors, please take them with a grain of salt. At Coffee with Kenobi, they're dead to us. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Han Solo, Rebel Soldier, Lando Calrissian, and Bespin Guard, each sold separately. From Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back Collection, new from Kenner.
Looking? Found someone you have, I would say,
Your lightsabers will make a fine addition to my collection.
In collector news this week, we have a couple of different things we found that were pretty entertaining. The first thing that I noticed, it just came out today, the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive is the Yak Face figure. This is tied into the Gentle Giant 12-inch Kenner figures. They're really, really cool looking. It's when you're talking about Kenner, you're talking about the origins of Star Wars and the Star Wars collectibles and the frenzy that caused. I can remember going to Penny's and Sears and Toys R Us and everything and seeing all those, and when they're wearing their capes, it's like that kind of plastic thing before they went to the cloth, and so cool. So check out the link in our show notes for what those 12-inch Kenner action figures look like. They're pretty fun.
And I don't know about you, Dan, but I was a big Lego fan when I was a kid, and Lego has done a wonderful job of the Star Wars franchise and coming out with wonderful sets, wonderful characters, a couple animated releases. Video games obviously are huge. And the next set is the Ewok Village Lego set, and it's massive. It's huge. It's got all the characters, Wicket and C-3PO and all those characters in that scene, and it looks great. And I know my kids love playing with those Legos for hours and stuff. But it's a nice addition to the Star Wars universe.
And weren't you telling me that there have been many a nights with your children where you've been walking around and tell the people that story?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if who out there has kids that leave their toys out. I don't think that happens very often.
Yeah, only every kid in the universe.
Only any kid in the universe, and anybody out there knows that you're getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom or check on something or hear a noise or but you're walking through the living room and all of a sudden your foot just is crushed. Well, I shouldn't say crushed.
Why not?
No, it was more of like all of a sudden your foot is stabbed by an increasing hot pain that burns through the rest of your leg, and find yourself on the floor, blacked out and dazed, and all of a sudden it's the morning and you realize it's been a Lego all along that put you there, and that I think everybody's been in that situation.
Sure, it could have been a spear from one of the Lego Ewoks.
It could have been a Star Wars lightsaber. Takes the arms right off. So
sure, it could be a staple. But that's not really related to Star Wars. There's no staple podcast that I'm aware of.
That's awesome.
And this is something the next thing is something that Corey sent me today. It was on Geek Tyrant. Corey loves to get his info from Geek Tyrant among other places, but there's a really cool collection of Star Wars backpacks, and I don't want to talk about back to school because school just got out for me, and it's June, which probably means there'll be Christmas stuff in Walmart tomorrow. I'm sure there already is. But anyway, they've got these really, really cool Star Wars Rebel backpacks. There's a Stormtrooper one. There's an R2-D2 one. Personally, I think the Rebel backpack one is the coolest. Check that out in the show notes. Which one did you like the best?
Yeah, I like the Rebel backpack. It looks really nice. It looks really dirtied up and kind of like it's been used. And the orange is a great color orange, too. So
yeah, it's like you'd see it in the Moon of Yavin on the Rebel base there.
Oh, yeah. I can see it hiking through the woods. Absolutely.
And finally, I was looking around there's a website, thingsfromanotherworld.com, where I get a lot of comics and things, and they have collectibles and action figures. But I was scrolling through Star Wars, seeing what they had, and they had a really cute Tauntaun plush, believe it or not. I'm not normally into plushes, but I've recently been blessed with the birth of Mason Michael Zare, so I had to order him a Tauntaun plush. They also have a Rancor. They have Wampa. I can't remember what else they have, but go ahead and check the link in the show notes for that as well.
I want to say, Dan, maybe it's quite a few years ago that when Beanie Babies were big, there was, I want to say that, I can't think of the company, but they had produced, it was Star Wars Beanie Babies or something like that. That's what it reminds me of. There was a Wampa, I think, and a Tauntaun. I could be mistaken. So I think I remember I had a Chewie and a Wampa, and there was a Yoda, I think, too.
Seriously, I don't know. Was it the actual Thai company that does the Beanie Baby?
I think it was the Thai company.
Sort of a rip-off, probably.
Maybe a rip-off. Don't quote me on this.
Tune in each fortnight to the IndieCast, the world's #1 Indiana Jones fan podcast.
Trust me.
Featuring the latest news, reviews, and interviews with on-screen and behind-the-scenes talent who help bring to life the greatest adventure movie series ever made. Each episode has the latest from the world of Indiana Jones, as well as interactive segments, trivia, contests, and specials, including radio dramas and music retrospectives. The IndieCast.
It's a transmitter. It's a radio for speaking to God.
Available in iTunes or listen directly at theindycast.com.
If adventure has a name, it must be the IndieCast.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
Our topic for show number 3 is the Jedi Order and attachments. Why can Jedi not have attachments? Is this the main flaw that leads to their downfall? Why do the Jedi have such a strong dogma, as Palpatine states? This is a topic that has intrigued and plagued us for a while. We have some excellent thoughts on this, and Corey, I'm just going to go ahead and write down the emails for us. We got some stuff, even down to right before we started recording, we were getting comments on this, so we're going to share with you what we have. First one is Kyan Royalty, and he says, show number 2 is awesome, guys. Good job. Attachment in the Jedi Order is an interesting topic. As we know, the Jedi Order does not allow emotional attachments in their members, stating that emotional weaknesses will ultimately lead to the dark side. I mean, it's even in the first line of the Jedi Code. There is no emotion, there is peace. They perceive attachments to be a weakness, believing that this will lead the members of the Order to make rash decisions that could contradict with their beliefs and ultimately lead to them leaving the Order or even falling to the dark side. Personally, I believe that the lack of emotions and attachments is a weakness. Think about us as humans. Can you imagine what it would be like if we were not attached to other people or things? There would be no families. Love would not exist. Personal items or heirlooms would no longer have meaning. I can't even begin to think how boring life would be. People would be less individualized. These attachments that we have are important. They give us something to live for rather than just droning on through life without having anything to look forward to. Here's a theory for why the Jedi have forbidden emotional attachments within their order. In my mind, the Jedi Order is essentially a religion, a way of life. As with any religion or faction, the leaders, the High Council in this case, are always worried about losing followers, especially in times of war. The Great Sith War, the Clone Wars, etc. As a response to this fear, they created a code where if you follow it, there's not very many outs to get around things. If you live without attachments, there will be no reason to make rash, sometimes irresponsible decisions that could compromise your beliefs as a Jedi. There's no love to make you do crazy things. Another possible reason would be, as I mentioned, people are less individualized about their emotions. If they so choose, this could be used to create cookie-cutter Jedis who will be willing to do anything that the Council wishes at a moment's notice. I don't know about it, but one interesting thing to note is that when Luke Skywalker took over as Grand Master of the Jedi Order, he was not as strict with attachments. He didn't much care whether or not the members of the Order had attachments to other people. Excellent comment. Great way to start us off. The thing is, at the end he talks about being the Grand Master of Jedi Order. That's from the expanded universe, the EU, as we refer to. So I don't know how much I want to address that right here per se, although we have sort of officially, unofficially assigned Kyan to be our expert on the EU, so we may have him on the show for discussing that. The thing that interests me, there's a lot of things in here to discuss, to like the idea that he talks about cookie-cutter Jedis, they're willing to do anything the Council wishes. Well, that to me sounds like the clones, which is what happened in, of course, the future bonus episodes of the Clone Wars are going to show Order 66 in a lot more detail, but he brings up some interesting points.
You got some great points, Dan, and I think, too, is the way you mentioned the cookie-cutter Jedis was interesting. Yeah, you don't want everybody's different, but another thought that popped in my head was, we're not just dealing with humans here. We're dealing with aliens, and I don't know, a lot of their backgrounds are different as far as the Jedi Order, and do they set those beliefs aside when they enter the Jedi Order and just take on everything? Because, as we know, as far as different species and different aliens, as far as the Jedi Order goes, a lot of them have different backgrounds and different religions and different beliefs as well, not just humans. So I would think, too, this takes a different side to it as far as looking at a different dynamic of different species across the board.
And I think you brought up a good point, and so does Kyan here. The main problem for me with attachments, I actually twice have submitted this question to Dave Filoni when he does his big chats with Rebel Force Radio, or whatever he does, and he's a very busy guy, so I was not actually personally talked to with him, although would that not be great to have him on here talking about this? Nevertheless, I think the big flaw here, and he addresses this, and you did too, not allowing attachment and human emotion takes away the human element. The Jedi are individual. Whatever their species is, they still are human beings or have human characteristics. It's their humanity which gives them a soul, which gives them a conscience. So taking away their attachments, their emotional attachments, is a huge problem because it takes away their humanity.
That's a good point, Dan. And I agree with that because look at the biggest character in the Star Wars universe, Anakin Skywalker, who is basically hurt throughout his life. He doesn't have a father figure. He's ripped away from his mother to join the Jedi Council, and possibly, become the next Jedi. They didn't know at the time, but, so all these figures in his life, his loved ones are ripped away from him as far as his life. And then also, you think about this as well, Dan, is falling to the dark side and losing Padme and his mother was a crushing blow to him. He's the pinnacle of this discussion as well. I mean, because we've seen basically his entire life, and you can see how attachments have been good and bad in his life as far as the Jedi Order. And if you think about it, he doesn't realize this towards the end, where Luke, unveils his human side at the end of a Jedi, and he just says, "I want to look on my son." So right then and there, wouldn't Luke be an attachment for him choosing to return to the light side? And I think that's a big plan as well.
It's huge, and I think you nailed the idea that the whole thing has to be about balance, not extremes in any way. And these are actually all good metaphors for life. Once he realizes it's okay to have attachments. And attachments, I think we're not talking about attachments here. At least we aren't. When you're talking about bad, unhealthy attachments, look at Gollum and Lord of the Rings. Those are unhealthy attachments, making things into false idols. And it's going to be hard, as we continue through these discussions, to not involve religion when it comes to attachments in the Jedi Order. So, and that's going to show itself as we continue on with these emails too. Our next email comes from Becca Benjamin. Hey guys, loved your podcast. Just awesome. Have to admit, I even fangirl squeed when you mentioned the possibility of doing a show based off my idea of the slave Leia comment. Now, on to the next topic, attachment in the Jedi Order. Now that's quite the can of worms you're opening, isn't it? Okay, so we do know that the Jedi Code does not allow attachments of any kind, even though over the years this said code has been modified many times over. At one point, it was said that Jedi do not marry, with some exceptions, in order to avoid attachment and to not create dynasties of those strong in the Force. Makes one wonder, what did they fear would happen? Let's face it, the Force is already unbalanced, or so they believed. Did something happen in the past that was so catastrophic that they did not want history to repeat itself? Or was it completely the opposite? Could they, the Jedi Council, be so naive or ignorant to the whole concept of family, love, attachment, that they actually denounced it in order to hide their own fears of the unknown? Especially when brought face to face with the young, unusually strong in the Force Anakin Skywalker. Let's be honest. It was painfully obvious how shaken with uncertainty the Council was when he stepped foot into their temple. Here was a child, yet exceptionally strong with the Force, who knew all about the emotions of love, family, attachments. All the things that were unknown to them, and all they sensed was fear. Fear they blamed on Anakin due to leaving his mother behind, but maybe they used that to cover up their own fear of this unknown virgins in the Force. Honestly, I think they could have learned a lot from Anakin. They'd have just given him a chance and made him feel more welcome than a problem. I use that phrase, a problem, because that is exactly what he says to Qui-Gon in Phantom Menace. Furthermore, if they could have just listened to him more, made him feel comfortable enough to talk about his feelings to alleviate his conflicting emotions, things may have worked out differently. Then again, we wouldn't have much to discuss, would we? As a powerful senator once said, this war represents a failure to listen. This could be said about the Jedi Order, as well, especially where attachments and the ability to change are concerned. Keep up the great work. Can't wait for the next show. Well, thank you, Becca. As always, bringing up some very intriguing things about attachments in the Jedi Order.
She's got a lot to say there, and she brings up some awesome ideas, especially some awesome thoughts as far as this discussion goes. And I like the way that she talked about how the Jedi Order, when they first met Anakin for the first time, they both kind of took a breath of like, oh, what's this going to be? What's going to happen? Who's this child? And to go from there, as far as they did deny him as far as training goes, and because they were, like I said, they were unsure. They had a fear of what may come out of it.
And also, when you think about this whole fear thing, if they really are governing their doctrine, their mandates on fear, then they're no better than the Sith, are they? Because They're worried about the unknown. They're worried about these attachments. And I know I've heard before this idea of there being too many strong virginces in the Force in these dynasties. But again, if you're Jedi and your job is to help and protect, not to fight wars, then why should you worry about people bonding and having strong attachments to one another? Doesn't that create strength? And this is where I wanted to bring up the idea of attachments in real life. You and I are married. We have children. Our attachments to our family make us strong. Love is what makes us strong. Really, this attachment, Yoda is concerned in Empire Strikes Back that Luke is going to run off and face his emotions. It seems more like this is more of a problem with linguistics. Because attachment in itself isn't the problem. It's obsession or making something into a false idol or getting confused about what's important in your life and not having balance in your life. That's a problem. That can cause you to be reckless and fight rather than defend and to protect. So it seems like more like they needed a better attorney to sort of write their Jedi codes for them or something, because attachment, is that really the problem?
I agree, Dan. I don't know if that's the problem or not, and you bring up some great points on, our own lives as people in general. We love one another as far as human beings, and that does turn every different day and every different hour of the day what decision we're going to make, be it good or bad, and that happens with everybody. That's also come up with the Sith as well, Dan. They've also had attachments as well as far as lovers or loved ones, children, and obviously that tweaks their thinking and their decisions as well.
And it isn't until the end, I think, of Return of the Jedi when Yoda says you must confront Vader. But I think Obi-Wan says that you have to kill Darth Vader, doesn't he?
It's interesting because you think about it, he says as he has to confront his fear. Where if you think about her email, she discusses how possibly the Jedi Order was running from their fear, and Luke is almost turning the tide as far as the Jedis go. He's going to confront Vader at the end of Jedi, confronting his fear of his father.
At the end of Return of the Jedi, in the middle, Yoda says you have to confront Vader, and he does have to confront Vader, but it's this whole thing where everyone finally realizes that Luke's strength is that he has these attachments, he has these family members, these loved ones that make him who he is. When you're talking about the core of evil, and I'm no psychologist, but I do know something about the fact that in literature, or in all things, evil wants to separate you and keep you to be solo. The Sith, they have the rule of two that we talked about with Darth Bane in Episode 3 novelization. So the Sith want you to be a solo artist, to be by yourself. Whereas the Jedi, as an order, they function as a family, even though they may not always acknowledge it, but they still care about each other. They don't want anyone to be hurt. They can't help but want to avenge those who have fallen. So it's only natural, I think, this whole idea of attachments should be thought of as a good thing, because the Sith do the opposite.
I think also, Dan, that the Jedi, obviously, they have Padawans, and they build a relationship off one another. And we look at Anakin, we look at Ben Kenobi, and we see their relationship as friends, as brothers. Or you cannot not tell me that that's not an attachment right there.
Exactly. And actually that leads to a really quick blurb. Normally we don't read these tweets on the air, but Star Wars fans of EU, they have been amazing at getting our Facebook page with a lot more likes and bringing attention to us, and we really appreciate them again. But it was tweeted to us through Star Wars fans of the EU. They put, I'm not with the whole no marriage rule. All the Jedi and Luke's group are fine with it, and many Jedi from the past were. And again, this is more expanded universe stuff. I'm more of a canon guy, but that's fine. I mean, there's a good point there. It's, again, attachment through marriage. That's a good, healthy thing. Having attachment to your children and your friends, that makes you a more full person. The Sith want to alienate that. So the fact that the Jedi see this as a weakness or something that can lead to fear or the downfall, it's almost like they're afraid of if you get too emotional and become an evil maniac. And obviously Anakin fulfills that, but is it more of a self-fulfilling prophecy, or is that just kind of a bad example?
I think, Dan, that's a great discussion for a possible another show topic that we are thinking about is a fulfilling prophecy. And even we talked about this off the air, I think, a little bit too, is Palpatine's his actions leading up to that as well. What's his end means? What's his end game as far as creating Darth Vader? Is it to bring balance to the Force of some sort?
Good point. And probably for him, he just cares about control, which is, again, this whole not having attachment. That's about control too. So I want to go on to Austin Page's email. Austin Page is another former student of mine, and we were very excited to hear from you, Austin. And here's what he writes. If this makes it to the podcast, thanks a bunch to you both. In regards to attachments, here we go. Anakin's path towards the dark side was partially due to his love for his wife and wanting to save her from certain death. One can sympathize. Death is a frightening enigma. Being afraid to lose his love is understandable, especially Padme. She was there for him when he lost his mother. She's been there since the beginning of the subtle darkness that brewed in him early as a kid. A large factor in Anakin's fall was the puppet master Darth Sidious. Anakin had Obi-Wan and Yoda to come to for guidance, as he did in Episode 3, but Sidious, who reminds me of Wormtongue in The Lord of the Rings, uses his skills in persuasion that he's honed over the years coming from a political family. Just like Harvey Dent, Anakin was one of the best of them, and he was broken down and twisted into a corrupted version of their former self, becoming more machine now than man. The factor in here that can be removed by the Jedi Order is the idea of attachments, and that's what they proceed to do. There are exceptions made for specific examples in the history of the Order, but this is something in their grasp that they can dissolve as a problem. Jedi Code takes away something that is held in its high regard. It's free will. It's simple psychology to want something that has been taken away from you. This is more so for Anakin since he was an older child, not following the traditions of being brought into the Order at the toddler stage of life. As Anakin once said, Jedi are encouraged to love and feel compassion. I'm not sure on the love aspect. He could have been slyly manipulating his wife at the time, but compassion is an emotion that gives us drive. It gives us motivation to strive for our goals, especially those that seem figuratively out of reach. Anakin was more than a Jedi. He was human, and took that path that most people take, a path we can relate to, the hard part. And it took him until his death to learn from his mistakes that he made and die, having a new attachment in his life, the love for his son, which in the end redeemed him from the darkness and then led him to destroy Sidious. Compassion and love was his downfall, yet was his savior, as was he of the galaxy. Hidden meanings everywhere. What is the downfall for Anakin? Yeah, I'd say that's part of it, but that's very evident. But as Dan stated in one of the earlier episodes, Anakin is a character who oozes complexity. We can't hit the nail on the head with just one reason. In entirety, attachments play a huge factor in his life. And Austin, thank you for that email. And that also shows we've got some really smart fans here of this show, and we really appreciate it. And actually, all of you fans are who make this show possible with your intelligent discussions. And again, we try to make Coffee with Kenobi into a show where if we're all sitting around at Starbucks or somewhere, and we're all just sort of talking about things that are fascinating to us, these higher-level concepts, these critical thinking concepts of attachments, of anything in the Star Wars universe. And so there's a lot there to digest.
I agree, Dan, that there was a lot there, and like you said, you took the words right out of my mouth. We got some great fans that have got some great ideas, and like they couldn't say it better than me. He's got some good things as far as Anakin goes. Anakin himself, he's almost an enigma as far as his drive and like he said, his emotions. He's got a great point about Anakin and his compassion as far as making that his drive. Sidious did, curb that into his own, for his own use. But I think even still, it was such a huge thing, and compassion is huge with love and with friendships, and that does drive us on a daily basis.
Austin, also, I like that he brings up the fact of Obi-Wan's line, he's more machine now than man, twisted and evil. I think this is the thing about attachments that for some reason the Jedi don't see. It always drove me crazy because they're supposed to be so intelligent. When they take away the idea of attachments, we are human beings. If you have a toddler and you don't play with that toddler or touch that toddler or tell the toddler you love them, the baby will die. And that's just the reality of the situation. So taking away attachments from a human being makes them more machines or more like robots. So, and isn't it interesting that at the end of Return of the Jedi, Darth Vader becomes Anakin Skywalker again because he takes off the mask and he takes away that machine part and embraces his humanity. Once he embraces that humanity, embraces the attachments in his life, then he's able to become Anakin Skywalker and bring balance to the Force.
You had a good point, Dan, and I think as far as loved ones go, you look at Padme at the end of Episode 3 where she dies not from the childbirth, but from the loss of love and the loss of her loved ones, and then obviously Anakin turning to the dark side, and she knew that, and it just crushed her physically and emotionally.
In essence, it's like she loses her attachment, wouldn't you say?
Oh, that's a great point. Yes, exactly. And she's, grown up with the Jedis and known and taken from them as far as their beliefs, and she would know this, obviously. So yeah, that's a good point.
That leads us to our next email. It is from Craig Dickinson, and Craig's someone that we found on Twitter. He was talking actually with Sam Witwer, which we are totally impressed with, and he was talking to Sam about Sam's amazing idea about the different order of showing the Star Wars films, which we could definitely talk about at some point. But here's what Craig writes. One of the things that was interesting to me about the prequels was that they continually showed the fallibility of the Order and its members, specifically the issue of attachment in regards to the Jedi. On the one hand, a lack of attachment allows the Jedi to put their mission first without having to worry about the safety or welfare of loved ones. This has much in common with the concept of superhero secret identities. If one has nothing to lose or nothing known, one cannot be as easily compromised by one's enemies. But on the other hand, is it realistic to expect anyone to be 100% selfless and without attachment? And if Anakin was allowed to have a normal relationship with Padme, couldn't he have gone to the Jedi Council for help with his visions? Maybe he doesn't end up going to the dark side if this is the case. And what of Luke? He and Leia wouldn't even exist if not for Anakin's attachment to Padme. Clearly, there are upsides to this attachment. Both Anakin and his son Luke struggle with this issue, probably due in no small part to their Jedi training starting so late in life. Both disobey their masters in regard to attachment and suffer serious emotional and physical injuries to their right hands because of it. But ultimately, it is Luke's attachment to his father that saves Vader from the dark side, as he disobeys Yoda's and Kenobi's orders to kill the Dark Lord. What's more is that Vader's love for his son saves Luke from Palpatine, and is probably the biggest reason he is able to return from the dark side and become Anakin Skywalker again. So attachment causes pain for the Jedi, but also is the reason for the Force bringing balance. And that email is from Craig. Thank you, Craig, for that great insight into attachment. And Corey, what did you think about his email?
I like what Craig says as far as this having commonality with the superhero secret identities, which is very interesting to think about too, as Jedis, as heroes in their own right, and wanting to keep that, the part of them not secret so much as far as, but to themselves, not branching out as far as loved ones. And I know it's a big thing in the superhero world where it's, don't let your enemies find out who your loved ones are because they'll attack them first and get to them first. And I think also that if, a Sith Lord was gunning for a Jedi, they would obviously go after their loved ones and their friends and family. Maybe that's the reason they don't have attachments. That's a great reason. I mean, it's a huge reason, but in the long run, I think too, it does harbor the Jedis emotionally.
True, and then you have to also consider the fact that, since there are only two Sith, they have bullseyes on them at all times, and the entire Jedi Order could come after them, which is one of the reasons why they have to be slow in their machinations of how they attack, and why Palpatine takes so long to try to subvert the Jedi Order and their relationship really with not only with the Senate and with the Republic, but just with the universe in general. And it's like, if there really is a concern, it's almost like they're looking at the Jedi. Sometimes when they talk about the Jedi and attachments and what they can and can't do, and you have to do it at a certain age and blah, it almost sounds like the Mafia or something. But it's supposed to be a good thing where you protect the universe, not destroy it. But again, this whole thing with attachments, clearly the Force is balanced and light takes over. Although I do have to ask real quickly, if the light takes over the darkness, is that really balanced either? But that's a story for another time. But when you think about it, when Luke takes over and gets Vader to embrace his attachment to his son, Luke takes the Jedi Order on to, and who knows what, we'll see that in Episode 7 with J.J. Abrams at the helm. Our next email comes from Ben Wood, and Ben writes, "This is an interesting topic because, in my opinion, it has no easy answer. While it is true that Anakin's marriage was the driving point behind his fall, this is in large part due to the need for secrecy. Had Anakin's marriage been public, Palpatine would not have been able to manipulate Anakin the way he did in Revenge of the Sith. However, there is a valid argument for barring Jedi from seeking romantic relationships. To be a Jedi is to be immensely powerful, attuned to a power beyond most other people. There's a certain amount of responsibility inherent in that to be careful with how one uses that power. Therefore, it would make sense for Jedi to shun romantic entanglements that can cloud judgment and produce strong emotions, which can lead to the dark side. That being said, I do not think that the Jedi should have put a blanket ban on such activities. Honestly, to do so is the easy route, which Yoda warns Luke against. Yes, Yoda was talking about the dark side, but I still think this applies. There should be guidelines, certainly. A Jedi is devoted to a life of service and should take care not to engage in activities that conflict with that. But it is possible to balance the two, as we have seen in Luke's order. Luke himself successfully balanced his commitment to the Jedi with his marriage to Mara Jade. This does raise another question, however. If a Jedi is to marry, should he or she do so with another Jedi with the same tension between the Order and the relationship? May the Force be with you, Ben Wood. And Ben, excellent. Again, very intelligent fans that we have on our show. So, Ben, we loved your feedback. And Corey, I know I've already got a couple things I want to say right off the bat, but I want to pick.
Go ahead.
Sure?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, start it off.
All right, well, for one thing, I don't know how much we've talked about this really before, but this whole thing about Anakin and his marriage being secret and balancing your emotions and all that, it almost sounds like sometimes the Jedi are supposed to be priests. And I don't think that is, and I'm sure that Ben agrees with us, but I don't know how that was a beneficial thing for the Jedi to do. I mean, you and I are married. You can have a lot of passion in your life and be passionate about and really focus on a lot of things, but you still know where your priorities are. If you're a Jedi, I don't look at you so much as an intergalactic priest so much as I do a peacekeeping warrior. Now, that is a paradox in itself. You can't really be a peacekeeper and a warrior, but the Jedi are forced to do that, a self-fulfilling prophecy, as it were, and it causes a lot of issues, clearly. Otherwise, we wouldn't even have a podcast to talk about Star Wars.
Being a Jedi is a hard thing. It sounds dumb to say that.
It's true.
But obviously, stemming from the events of the prequels and obviously Anakin and all the decisions he made, I mean, you can definitely see every decision he made was based off of people he loved. Everything he did. And that goes for his dealings with Palpatine. And, I mean, honestly, this may sound a little goofy, but he had a relationship with Palpatine as well. And I think that...
Oh, he did.
That drove his actions to betray, the Jedis, obviously.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but he was a father figure to him.
Oh, absolutely.
So he looked up to everything that he did. And then, of course, evil, as we said before, evil likes to divide and conquer. So when you take this romantic relationship that Anakin has with Padme, that makes him more human. That makes him have something to fight for and to preserve all the things that he holds clear for his values. And then Palpatine drives a wedge between that, and that's what causes the problem. It's not the attachment that's the problem. It's dealing with loss and healthy things. Plus, I mean, Anakin probably is a little psychotic. I mean, he, that's a whole other thing, but I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I think also this rings in my head for some reason in episode 3 where Obi-Wan yells at Anakin and says, "You're the chosen one." Obviously he's obviously saying, like, this is messed up. This is screwed up because you were supposed to be the one that changed everything. And you think about that phrase and you think the Jedi were waiting for a chosen one to reveal themselves, to bring balance to the Force. So maybe this was something, this attachment detail was something that they were looking to, flush out and like say, hey, once we find this chosen one, we'll know exactly what to do. And it just shows you how much maybe at that time period they were rocky, if you want to call it that, kind of up in arms of what to do, how to make decisions. Obviously, there was a lot of events going on at that time as well, political and non-political, and so they got to stretch out a lot, and there was dying off as well too. So the Jedi Order itself was dying off, in a sense. So
it definitely was, and having worked in the corporate world for a while before I became an educator, I know that the more meetings and councils you have, the worse things get, and the more pedantic and overwrought and ridiculous things get. So that bogs down. And this is why, what you just said is why I love our show. You made me think of something through discussion, the power of discussion, the power of rhetoric. That's what does it. If Anakin is supposed to bring balance to the Force, well, one of the things that he has that makes him who he is, he makes a lot of terrible choices. Eventually he redeems himself. The thing that makes him strong is his passion. Now, he, of course, again, he reroutes that passion, and it goes horribly wrong for a lot of people. But it's his passion and his attachments that make him who he is. He brings balance to the Force. So if you're going to follow that train of logic, that means attachment, not a bad thing.
I also just like to say thanks to Ben for bringing up the part about Mara Jade and Luke, and much as that is a great thing, and we like to read about that, we're trying to still, stay in the realm of the canon as far as the movies go, and we do love our EU, but I think that it is essential to discussion a little bit. I mean, it's almost like the changing of the guard type thing. This is Luke's era now. We're going to see what happens with his era, and he's obviously the only Jedi at the time then too. So he's going to kind of make the rules as he likes them. So
that's right. And you know what? And I'm so glad you said that. The EU, whenever we are a lot of fans that we have love the EU. We like the EU, the expanded universe as well. But when we're analyzing some of this, I want to stick to more what Lucas has in mind, and maybe that's just my own selfishness. I don't know. Feel free to disagree with us. In fact, fans, write in. How much should the expanded universe be a factor in our topic? Should we have sort of a separate ideology where we look at it through the lens of the expanded universe? That's a great idea. Or should we just stick straight to canon? And here's another good thing. All this stuff we're talking about with attachments, maybe when episode 7 comes out, maybe we'll have to revisit this topic because more things will be brought to light for us. So very exciting stuff. Our last email comes from Aaron Harris, and Aaron has been really, really great on Facebook, and he's been really, really supportive of the show. He's been a really great guy, so thank you, Aaron, for writing in. And here's what Aaron has to say. Gentlemen, first off, I'm a longtime Star Wars fan and Star Wars podcast listener. I love the fresh feel of Coffee with Kenobi, and you most definitely hit your goal with making these discussions feel like it's something happening at my local coffee shop. Keep up the great work, and I look forward to great things ahead. Now to the topic of the week, Jedi and attachments. Very interesting topic, because Anakin's attachment to his mother, Ahsoka, and ultimately Padme, is what led to his fall to the dark side. His mother died in his arms, and he couldn't stop it. Ahsoka was driven from the Jedi Order by a powerless Jedi Council who wouldn't stand up to Tarkin or the Senate in her defense when she was framed. Both situations out of his hands, out of his control. Granted, we don't know the end of Ahsoka's story, but if we assume the heartbreak Anakin showed at the end of the Clone Wars for Season 5, combined with the loss of his mother when the visions of Padme's suffering came, it took him back to a place he never wanted to be again. He didn't want to sit back powerless to save one person who he shared his life with. His desperation to keep from feeling that loss again, he was willing to turn his back on all he knew was right, to surrender himself to Palpatine and the dark side in the hope of saving not just Padme, but his unborn child. As a father myself, I know I would give everything I own to include saving the life of my little girl. I believe somewhere in the past, prior to anything we have seen to date, a great conflict occurred involving the Jedi, which cost so many lives that the Council had no choice but to make the no attachment rule. I could keep going, but I'll stop here. Keep up the great job on the cast, and I can't wait to hear more. May the Force be with you, Aaron Harris. Well, thank you again, Aaron.
He brings up some great stuff on the Clone Wars. We tend to think about just the, his mother dying in the prequels, and we forget about his other struggles as, his becoming a Jedi himself, a Jedi Master, and those upbringings and those learning everything from Obi-Wan. He did drive all his actions because of what happened to those he did love. Like we said before, it's obviously heartbreaking to see that. And like you said, well, like Aaron had said in the email, he didn't want to be in that place again. And he found himself there in desperation. So
he finds himself powerless to stop people from dying, which is one of Palpatine's hooks to get his claws into Anakin and manipulate him to focus him where he wants to push him to make Anakin a living weapon for him. By the way, sorry that Corey hasn't seen all of Clone Wars, so I hope that didn't ruin Ahsoka. It really didn't. There's the build-up, the plot, all that stuff is really powerful. So hopefully that didn't.
No, I will definitely finish the series out, and we are currently in season 2, and looking forward to the rest of the episodes coming out.
Very good. Well, anyway, back to Aaron's email. I'm glad to hear that. I think the idea too, where if the Jedi come up with these rules, what motivates them? Why do these things happen? Why the attachments? Again, they seem to think that attachments divert your focus. That doesn't indicate to me a lot of faith in anybody. Why would there even be a Jedi Council? Why are there even Jedi Knights if they're living in fear? I thought fear lead to anger, anger lead to hate, and hate lead to suffering. That's not the Jedi code. That is the Sith code. So again, I think if we can summarize all of this information that we've seen on attachments, is that when you try to take the humanity out of the human, you get chaos, you get conflict, you get anger and hate, and you get the Sith. So this is something that needs to be revisited and mentioned and discussed quite a bit, because it really leads to where Anakin Skywalker goes and adds to what Luke Skywalker has to do to help bring balance to the Force with his father. That was the last discussion we had, the last email we had on attachments. They're all fantastic. Again, we have very intelligent, intellectual fans, and we love your feedback. You make the show possible. Corey, do you want to have any last-minute words on attachments before we move on to our topic for show number 4?
Kind of what cements the two Jedi and the Sith, having such different attributes would be this attachment issue. Like you and I talked off air, and we talked about at the end of Jedi where Luke is fighting Vader, and the Emperor, says strike him down and kill him, and obviously wants to, Luke to take Vader's position. It just shows you how worthless the Emperor thought Vader was. He's just very expendable as far as his character and who he is, and it shows you. I really don't think a Jedi would do that in any sense. They want peace, they want togetherness as far as that goes, and I think that just draws a line as far as the light and the dark side, and it's a pinnacle as far as attachments go, and that's right up there as maybe one of the biggest struggles either side has, and really, really makes that individual lean either way.
And this is something that hopefully we'll see come to fruition as more Clone Wars information comes out. But I almost feel like when Ahsoka becomes Anakin's Padawan, that is something else that the Emperor can use to try to subvert him through subterfuge, really, to try to get him to struggle with that human side that the Jedi seem to intent on sort of beating out of him, and allows him to have someone more to be emotional about. I mean, Shmi, he loses Padme, although I don't know how much he loses Padme so much as he drives her away, but that becomes a self-fulfilling psychological prophecy. Again, this saga is rich in its complexity, and I hope that through our Coffee with Kenobi discussions, through the show and through our webpage and Facebook and Twitter, that people can see that there's a lot we can perpetuate through the saga. There is so much more than what is on the surface, and that's why we love the Star Wars universe so much.
My Jedi training didn't prepare me for this.
Our topic for show number 4 involves the role of female characters throughout the Star Wars saga. This was inspired by an email from Melinda, which we'll get to very soon, but we want to talk about Princess Leia, Padme, and Shmi, Mon Mothma, Aurra Singh, Aayla Secura, Ahsoka, etc.
Exactly, Dan. Are the women portrayed on an equal playing field with the other males in the Star Wars universe? If so, what evidence can we provide from the films and or the Clone Wars? This isn't a question of if you like the characters, but more about the role in the galaxy.
And please email and send us your information, your analysis of the role of female characters in the Star Wars universe, and we will discuss them on show number 4.
I like the sound of that.
Echo 3 to Echo 7. Ano, buddy, do you read me?
I saw part of the message.
I seem to have found it.
Our first email comes from Neil Baker. He says, show number 2 was jolly good. That's about as long as the podcast needs to be. You covered all the bases, and I didn't tune out. My quick 2 cents worth. I have every faith in JJ to do a great job with episode 7, given his love for the OT and his directing skills, and the fact that a decent screenwriter is tackling the story, instead of a vastly overrated Lindoff and the other two who turned in such a lousy script for Star Trek Into Darkness. Can only bode well for the future of the saga. I just hope that Abrams puts the camera on the tripod. No handheld in the Star Wars universe.
Well, thank you, Neil. Again, our GHG friend. We love hearing from Neil. And Neil, I'm glad that you're supporting the show. I'm glad you didn't tune out. I wouldn't think you would. Hopefully we can have Neil as a guest. I was fortunate enough to meet Neil in Chicago, and he is a very witty gentleman, so we like that. Interesting your comments on the no camera on a tripod. I know Neil is actually a filmmaker. I don't really know a lot about camera work in film. I do know that a lot of people are really on Lindoff and how he's handled Star Trek Into Darkness. You can listen to what we wrote. We made an entire show about Star Trek Into Darkness and J.J. Abrams in episode 7, so we encourage you to download that.
I appreciate Neil writing in and telling us what he thinks about each and every episode, because, like he said, we do have a Star Trek Into Darkness overview and review as far as it compares to what JJ might bring to the table for episode 7. Yes, absolutely. I look forward to what Abrams can do, and as far as the camera work goes, we'll just have to rely and see what he has up his sleeve.
Our next email comes from Tommy Mack from GHG. His thoughts on the second podcast, and he writes, the whole Disney controversy cracks me up. Fans that have done nothing but cry about George Lucas now wish he never sold Star Wars. Fans cried for decades until we got the prequels. Once we got them, what happened? The fans cried they sucked. Now all of a sudden, no one can do Star Wars but Lucas? Look, kids, it's simple. Either we resign ourselves to never having another Star Wars film, or we accept Lucas has moved on, embrace the change, and revel in the fact that we're getting new movies we never thought we'd ever get. And I agree with Dan. Star Wars is family fare. Something for everyone, and an R-rated Star Wars film would not be appropriate. Well, Tommy pretty much echoed everything I said before, and I love it. Tommy, of course, I completely agree with you, my friend.
Absolutely, I agree as well. I'm just glad we're getting a bunch of brand new movies and merchandise and all kinds of new stuff, and it couldn't be said better.
Our next email comes from Tyler Alexander, a former pupil of mine. He says, got around to downloading and listening to number 1 and 2 podcasts in between my exams today. Amazing. I also heard something about the making of a new Knights of the Old Republic game. Possible discussion there because I haven't been able to find more than just the rumors. Can't wait to hear more. Been a lot of talk about possibly having DICE, the creators of the Battlefield franchise, doing Battlefront, which would be awesome because that is a very well put together franchise and have a lot of potential to do some serious good with a Battlefront style game. And Tyler, this is a perfectly timed email. We talked about the new Battlefront in our news topics for discussion earlier in the show. I haven't heard anything about a new Knights of the Old Republic game. I know that the Knights of the Old Republic game was released on the iPad a couple of weeks ago, the original one, and I know that's been very well received. Quite a few downloads on that one.
Our next email comes from Austin Page, and his response to a Facebook discussion we had, and we definitely want to encourage people to go out there and check those out. He says, in response to, let's face it, the Force was already unbalanced, or so they believed. He says, I will have to bring up something that has always been controversial to me about this balancing metaphor we've all become so familiar with and have grown to quote in most simple Star Wars conversation. The Jedi Order's motivation has been said many a time to be the act of bringing balance to the Force, but isn't it already in balance? There has been 2 or more things being weighed for balance to occur. I always imagine an ancient Egyptian scale in my mind when I think over this. The dark side does end up completely being irradiated from known space, and the balance is out of whack. Obviously not from the perception from the Jedi, but perception is everything. Or if you refer to it to a certain point of view, go ahead. Obi-Wan would be proud. So to come full circle after my little rant, there needs to be a little dark side to balance out the light in the universe throughout this battle between light and dark. We have had order throughout chaos. In layman's terms, the constant fighting between the good guys and the bad guys keeps things balanced out. It's a simple look at things, but we have to step back and look at one side being good or bad, and let go of our fanboy or fangirl love for either side. If the dark side didn't exist, the Jedi wouldn't have anything to fight or defend the society from. They wouldn't be considered the good guys, they would just be considered force wielders. Some sort of security force against a common evildoer, or whatever clever name they could use to label them. And all thanks to Becca, she sparked the controversial topic in my head. I recommend discussing that in the future for one of your guys' episode. Love to hear what you guys think about all, and what you have to say. Look forward to the next show.
Well, thank you, Austin. That was awesome. That's the kind of high level of thinking that I would expect from you, as I remember from our discussions of The Hobbit and Dracula, among other things. But the most interesting thing to me is this whole notion that he brings up of if the dark side didn't exist, the Jedi wouldn't have anything to fight or defend society from. They wouldn't be considered the good guys. They would just be considered force wielders, some sort of security force against the common evildoer. I don't know. This whole brings up the whole notion of what is good and what is evil, and how can we define that? To me, good or evil is purely not only what you do, but how you think about what you do. We know, what is your motivation? Someone who saves someone's life because they're saving a life versus someone who saves someone's life to try to get attention or glory doesn't actually have compassion for that person. This is a gigantic issue that you could talk about in a philosophical podcast. The idea of light versus dark, and do we need light and dark for balance? We do. He talks about the ancient Egyptian scale in his mind, which I think is a fascinating way to look at it. I think if the dark side didn't exist, there would still be a Jedi Order. There would still be, I can't believe I'm actually going to do this, but the expanded universe has all kinds of villains or antagonists, as you would say that in literature, that are not force wielders, but are still evil. Grand Admiral Thrawn is not a force wielder. He's evil. There are plenty of examples of that.
I think Austin brings up some great topics, and obviously a huge discussion as far as points of view, as far as the good and the bad in any case of it has to be there. It's almost how you balance life. There's always going to be good, there's always going to be bad, and to have either side be force wielders or special abilities to be able to combat each other, you're going to have equal on both sides on some respects. So I think he brings us a lot of great topics that we can definitely discuss for future episodes.
Our last email comes from Melinda Wolf, another GHG member, and a very generous person, I might add. Hi, Dan and Corey. So far, so good. Doesn't it feel great to have 2 episodes of Coffee with Kenobi under your belts? With a that's a wrap as you turn off your microphones, I'm just inserting my own imaginings here, the kinks get worked out. Quite frankly, the kinks are more technical, and it looks like you guys are dealing with them as they arise. Here's my list of topic suggestions and questions you might want to address or cover in future episodes. Like Becca, I'm all for talking about the roles of female characters throughout the Star Wars saga. I applaud GL for creating such strong female characters like Princess Leia, Padme, and Shmi. Even though she was only in one short scene, even Mon Mothma's role of authority in Return of the Jedi makes for a strong female influence. I also like the fact that female characters were shown in non-traditional roles like bounty hunters or a Sing, for instance. Female Jedi going into and leading their troops into battle is pivotal too, at least to me. It shows women are equal to their male counterparts, something we all need to remember. Even those of us whose favorite characters happen to be of the male persuasion, I make no secret of the fact that Luke is my favorite character, know the importance of the female characters in the Star Wars saga. This can be fused with the growth of female fandom in the Star Wars galaxy. We're a force to be reckoned with, and anybody who has ever been to at least one celebration knows the female fan base is huge. Another story idea is to talk about how your respective significant others deal with your penchant for Star Wars. Just how far does Star Wars permeate your lives? You have a room devoted to everything Star Wars? Like our home, is Star Wars a common feature as you move about from room to room? Dan, you've heard me talk about our Star Wars room, have you not? Of course, there needs to be balance. Do your family members revel in your use of Star Wars-isms, or do they just roll their eyes whenever you quote one of the characters or make a reference to the saga? And Dan, you in particular, you have a baby on the way. Do you intend to bring him or her up on Star Wars? I know I tried to help out in that matter, not that you needed any help, with the baby basket I sent you last month, and she did, by the way. I'm just inserting my comments here, but she sent a very generous gift, and it was awesome. Back to her email. How have you influenced those young people or children in your respective lives, passing along the torch, so to speak? Are either or both of you members of a Star Wars club like the Rebel Legion? If so, maybe you can talk a bit about that. What is it like to be part of such a group and some of the endeavors in which they have participated or have coming up? Dan, I know you're a teacher. Corey, I'm so sorry. I can't recall if you mentioned what you do for a living. Dan, do you infuse Star Wars into your lessons? Science and or literature are the 2 subjects that come to mind quickly. History too. I'm not sure about math, but you never know. Back in my substitute teaching days, I always carried my lunch to school in my Star Wars lunchbox. Didn't matter if I was teaching kindergarten or high school students that day. I love the reaction from the students, and I always managed to get Star Wars into a lesson or spend some free time talking with students about the space fantasy. The younger girls were quite frank with their opening remarks. But Mrs. Wolf, you're a girl. I know, I'd reply and smile. Girls can like Star Wars too. Maybe I open their minds to a wider approach of the world. Do your offices, cubicles, desks advertise to one and all your fandom? What's the reaction from your coworkers? Is there one item in your respective collections that is essentially precious or special to you? What is it? What significance does it hold to you? Do either of you have a particular penchant for one aspect of Star Wars? If so, what is it and why? Any chance you could somehow set up interviews via remote? I'd suppose with individuals who have been associated with Star Wars. It doesn't necessarily have to be the most well-known, and even fans who you think would be interesting to talk to. That could add some dimension to the show. Not that it is lacking in that regard right now, especially the further along you got. They wouldn't have to take up the entire show, maybe about 10 minutes. You could call it something like Kenobi's Corner. Well, I suppose I should wrap things up. Let me just add that I've enjoyed Coffee with Kenobi very much. The length of the show is just right, and it's been so much fun to listen to you two every couple of weeks. I hope this has a long run. I'll be listening. Take care, Melinda. Well, Melinda, wow. That is an epic email, and I love it. And she brings up so many topics. Frankly, her whole opening intro about female fans and female characters. That's going to be our topic for show number 4, as Corey mentioned earlier and we talked about. There are a lot of things there to talk about with female fandom personally, and feel free to address whatever you want to on this, Corey. We haven't really talked about this in advance, but I'm just kind of going to go through her things. She asked a lot of questions. She asked about how much does Star Wars permeate our lives. Well, it permeates my life quite a bit. We are expanding on our home. I'm going to put in an office downstairs so I can grade some papers and work on some stuff.
And a Death Star.
And a Death Star, but no big deal. But I'm going to avoid the whole thermal exhaust port because it doesn't need to be below the main port.
I know. It shouldn't be there anyway, so go ahead.
It's all good. So, just please edit out. It's all good. Seriously.
Dude, you love saying it's all good.
I say that.
You say it every episode.
I do? You're right, I do. It's horrid. Do we have a room devoted to everything Star Wars? I'm going to. Personally, I have stuff from all over the place. I've moved around a lot. Gotten married recently to the love of my life, Deanna. And my office downstairs in our basement that we're adding on is going to be full of Star Wars stuff. It will be the new Coffee with Kenobi headquarters, I'm excited to say. As far as do my family members rebel needs to Star Wars, I've been a Star Wars fan my entire life. It's just a part of who I am. It's not a big deal. I'm not obnoxious with it. It's just a normal part of who I am. And I firmly believe, and I hope that everyone who's listening to the show believes this too, whatever you like or whatever you're passionate about, you need to own that. You shouldn't obsess over it, but you need to own what you believe in because it makes you who you are. It all encompasses the person that is you. So you got to own whoever you are. You got to be who you are. Embrace it.
Yeah, as far as my family members and what they think, I have 4 children, and yes, I do plan to bring them up, and I have brought them up to the Star Wars universe. They've seen all the films and played the video games and seen the animated series Clone Wars, and it's something they can enjoy. And if they don't want to like it or they don't want to be part of it, that's up to them. Like Dan said, let it be something in your life that you enjoy to do, and don't be afraid to tell others about it. And especially my kids, they like bits and pieces, and they like the new stuff. They like the brand new Clone Wars the best, and that's great. I'm all for that. And if they're into something else, that's great too. I mean, I want to be able to be there for them as far as a role in their life that they can come to talk to and expand, and we can talk about all these great topics and subjects. As far as my own life, I don't have quite the collection that Dan does, but I do like to collect knickknacks here and there, and I can't get enough of just looking at stuff online and just wanting, of course, a lot of things. But Dan's got me beat as far as merchandising goes. I do have a Star Wars, it's a 10-year anniversary poster in my cubicle at work. I am a graphic designer. I do also book covers for authors on my free time and enjoy all that. And especially that, I let that inspiration of Star Wars and its imagination fuel my artwork. So I really enjoy doing that. Very well said. And did you address what do your family members think about your Star Wars-ness? Like, what about your wife? And this is going to be a fun one. Corey and I have actually been talking about the fact that one show that we do, we want to have our wives on talking about what Star Wars is for them and how they kind of view Star Wars through our eyes and through their own eyes. I think that's going to be a very, very fun gender discussion. But how does your wife handle your whole Star Wars thing? I will say that before we got married, I did have to sell my comic books to purchase the ring, which was all good. I have started a collection again the last couple of years or so. And she just kind of, tiptoes around it as far as, as long as I don't bring up these crazy topics with her, she's good to go. But I did, Dan, I will say, I did catch the other day drinking out of my Coffee with Kenobi coffee mug. And so I think she just wanted a little taste, if you will, as far as what we do. Ooh, that was punny. A little taste with the coffee mug. I like that. That was good. Yeah, and there's another question she asked about how do you influence young people or your children. She said you have a baby in the way. The baby is here. Mason is here. And I've already read, the very first book I ever read, Mason, was Vader and Son, which is awesome. It's a great book. It's really, really fun. It's sweet. It's cute. It's got a lot of fun Star Wars references. The illustrations are great. I'm going to introduce my child, and Corey does this too with his children. I'm going to introduce all the kids that we have, because I've got 2 older boys too. I introduce them to everything, and I let them make up their minds. There's a great documentary by Chris Mock, The Force Among Us and The Force Within Us. Corey and I actually went to Chicago and saw the premiere of the sequel, The Force Within Us. And
one of the sections of that film talks about different fathers and their sons. And some fathers really think it's important for them to like Star Wars, and some fathers think it's important but want them to make up their own minds. Corey and I are definitely in the camp where we want people to just kind of make up their mind on their own. Now, as far as I'm a teacher, do I infuse Star Wars into my lessons? I do. I talk about Star Wars all the time. I've got posters of Star Wars in my classroom. I am working up some lessons for next year using King Arthur and the mythology of King Arthur and tying that into A New Hope. I'm making that up this summer. I'm looking forward to that. Star Wars is just a part of who I am. It's a part of who Corey is. And it's fun. It's great. It reminds me of innocence. It reminds me of childhood. It reminds me of what's going on now. Corey mentioned earlier that his kids love the Clone Wars. It's just a great thing where generationally there are different aspects of the Star Wars universe that people love and gravitate towards, and it's phenomenal. Corey, she mentions that, is there an item in your collection that is special to you, and is there a certain aspect of Star Wars that you really particularly love?
As far as my collection goes, like I said, I don't have that large of a collection to really piece out anything in particular. But as far as aspect of Star Wars, I love the imagination. I love the world that George Lucas brings us. And it's really generational as far as the characters, the storylines, the plots, the romance, the battle scenes, everything from, the downfall to the New Hope, the turn of the tide as far as good beating out evil. And I think it's just such a classic tale that it's going to live on way past us, and certainly help with this new material that it does that as well, that my kids and grandkids will go on to enjoy it just as much as I have.
For me, we talked about this. This is a good time to bring up the Bearded Trio again. We've talked about this website. Rob and everybody at the Bearded Trio have been wonderful to us, very supportive, very encouraging. They did their rapid fire questions with both of us. They did mine last week and Corey's this week. And one of the things they ask is there something in your collection that's precious to you? What I put down, I have a lot of those Master Replica hilts. I have the Anakin one from Return of the Jedi. I have the Emperor's from Return of the Jedi, and I have Yoda's too. I love those. My favorite thing besides those is probably those Burger King Star Wars glasses that a lot of us grew up with. I love those things. I remember going through the drive-thru and my parents saying, "What do you want to eat?" "I want a Star Wars glass." "We know you want a Star Wars glass. What do you want to eat?" "I want a Star Wars glass." I was Stewie Griffin, apparently. So I love those things, and I have the old ones that I drank out of, and they're so faded, but I still love them. And then I ordered some from eBay a few years ago, and I have those in a hermetically sealed vault because I don't want anything to ruin them because
they're frozen in carbonite, right?
Yes, they are. And they're alive and in perfect hibernation. The last thing she brings up is, are we interested in setting up interviews and remotes? We most certainly are interested in that. That's going to be a big part of our show. This is only show number 3. We did, if you count our Star Trek Into Darkness special, which we're very proud of. I hope you download that if you haven't heard it already. If you count that show, this is our 4th show. We have a lot of people that we want to interview. We have a lot of surprises. And yes, Melinda, we want to interview the fans. You guys are a significant, important, integral part of this show. It's something that I talked about on the Cantina Crew. So the Cantina Crew is a great website. They were asking for bloggers. I applied, if you want to say that. I offered to do that, and they graciously accepted. So I've had a lot of fun with them. They are great guys over there, great guys and girls over there. And my most recent post was all about our show and how we want to have everybody contribute. So at some points, people who are a lot of fun or a great sense of humor and really get our show, get what the Star Wars saga is all about and how much we love it, we're going to want you to be a part of the show with us. So that is going to happen. And we don't have a specific time frame in mind. We're both very busy family men with a lot of children, a lot of things going on, but we most definitely want to make that happen. If you would like to respond to our question of the show, have a comment, or just want to say hello, send us an email at feedback@coffeewithkenobi.com. Or, if you have a specific question or comment for either of us individually, email us at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com or coryc@coffeewithkenobi.com, or visit us at coffeewithkenobi.com and click on the comments section. If you enjoy the show, please write a review in iTunes. You can also like the show on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, as well as keep up to date at our Twitter feed at twitter.com/coffeewithkenobi. If you enjoy the jazz music, download the album Eye to Eye by Steve Sansweet on iTunes.
Give the evacuation code signal.
That's it for show number 3 of Coffee with Kenobi. Thanks to everyone who contributed to this week's show, and to all of you out there who listen to our show. Don't forget to send us your comments and opinions on the topic for show number 4, the role of women in the Star Wars universe. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Ltd. and is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at starwars.com. Star Wars. All names and sounds and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
There's no one here. Move along. Move along.